Welcome to another episode of Heads Over Heels. I'm Angela Cedrin, your host, and today we are going to be talking with Rose Davidson about starting your own podcast. Rose, you need no introduction. You are one of Australia's top podcasters. You have a podcast called Talking with the Experts. You are a podcast producer, and you've also recently shared the news with me that you are going to be starting your own radio station. Wow, that's amazing.
Very exciting.
It is, I know. Tell me how you ended up on this journey, because the other thing that I'm very keen to talk to you about is, look, you're not a millennial, I'm not a millennial. And I love the way you've completely reinvented yourself.
It's not hard. Back in 2020, in July, so it was just after the pandemic and everything went into lockdown. I was seeing a lot of business owners were challenged with, changing their businesses from offline to online. And I just had an epiphany one night. I thought, why don't I start a podcast and get other business owners to, give their take on, how they were managing with the pandemic and give some hints and advice. And I thought, business owner to business owner, people might be interested. And so that's how it started. And 333 episodes later, I'm still going strong. It's actually my third anniversary in a couple of weeks.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And the other thing I think that a lot of, I hate the term older women, but non-millennials, women who are slightly beyond being millennials, face is this real fear of technology as well. And that's something that you've really conquered. But look, I'm really keen to talk to you today about how the heck do you start a podcast? Well, first of all, why should you start a podcast if you have your own business? So let's talk about that. And I know the answer. So we're definitely then going to go into how do you do it? So why should someone start a podcast?
Yeah, starting a podcast is really great for your business because it brings authority and gives the business a credibility. People get to know, like, and trust you, which is really important now because the world has shrunk because of live video and so forth. So we're a lot closer than we used to be. So to get your business really out there and to show that you're an expert in whatever field that you happen to be in, having a podcast is an excellent way to show that. I mean, you don't have to actually be a solo. You can interview people like I do, and that still shows your own authority because, you can chat with like-minded people and share your thoughts with your guests, and so that does show your authority.
Exactly. So it's a bit like me chatting with you today. I mean, I'm not an expert at podcasts by any means, but I help women with their coaching businesses. And this is another way of me adding value to my audience. So in the same way you're saying, if I, for example, started a podcast, I could chat with different experts and occasionally perhaps even have my own show where it's just me talking to position myself and my business globally. And this is the fantastic thing. This ability to reach the world, every corner of the world now, that is so exciting for women.
I have noticed that previously there were a lot of men had podcasts, and women, really had the feel-good type podcasts. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. But what I mean is that, it was like a lot of coaching businesses in healing modalities and so forth, where I'm finding a lot more women now are being more open with business podcasts and how they can help other women move through their journey of being an entrepreneur and a business owner.
I'm really excited to see that too, because whilst I am a feminist in the sense that I believe in equality, we are different and we face different issues. And just the other day, I was interviewing a parenting coach around how do women run a business and a life without losing your mind. And that situation is not the same for a guy. So I think it's fantastic that we have more women like you, and you are a leader in this. You're one of the first in Australia in business to stand up and talk to women about business as well. So I really commend you for that. If you're a woman watching this, the world needs you. We need you as leaders to pave the way and to trailblaze for all of us.
Absolutely. I think there's not enough of us are standing up and being counted and letting our voices be heard. And really having a podcast, you don't have to have a business. You just have to have a passion for it. The main thing about having a podcast is that you're consistent. At least one a month is, that is consistent, but it's got to be every month. It's not, have a month here and a month there. It's got to be every single month.
Yeah.
Or every single week or every single fortnight, but just so your audience knows that you're there and when you're going to be there. So,
right. So
it's really important that way, because most podcasters finish after about the first 5 episodes because they find it challenging, but it doesn't have to be. It's really quite simple.
Well, actually, there was a quote that I saw the other day that the difference between successful people and losers is that the successful people kept going, even though they kept losing until they got a win. And I guess it's the same with podcasts. I mean, I've recently started doing reels on Instagram, and some days I get 3 views and other days I get 8,000 views. And the days where you get 3 views, you just want to pack it all in. So what I'm hearing you saying as well, it's the same with podcasting, with any marketing. You've got to be committed. You've got to understand that maybe you're not going to go from 0 to 1 million people overnight, but you've got to make that commitment and be consistent and show up. But there was an issue.
Sorry. It took me 2 years to get up to 20,000 downloads, or 18 months. So it's it's been a really long journey, I think, and you get disheartened when you first start, because you're right, most podcasts don't get instant fame out of it. It takes a long time, but I don't think that not having the downloads, you should give up. You should just keep going and going and going, because if you keep going and persist, then people will know that you're out there, and it's really important.
Yeah. And here you are now. You've got a global summit that you're hosting later this year. You've got potentially a radio station happening as well. So there's also momentum happening in all of this by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about starting a magazine too, highlighting all of my guests and having a bit of a, biography about them and a snippet of the podcast that I've had with them, and then that will give the opportunity for advertisers to come on board and get themselves out there and known in the global space.
Right. So what you're effectively saying to me is it's not just about building your authority. Once you really start getting some traction in your podcast, you can monetize it as well.
Yes. Yeah, you can do it in all sorts of ways. I mean, to monetize your podcast is basically about advertising your own services. I'm very guilty of not doing that, but I do encourage the people that I work with to have a 30-second little blurb about, their latest offering, a course they might be having, some product or service that they want to promote. It's a really good way to make money out of your podcast. You can also ask for sponsorship through Patreon, or get people to sponsor you, and just ask for sponsorship, or you can go to Buy Me a Coffee and get people to pay $5 here or $5 there if they really like an episode.
Wow.
So it's not hard.
I'm just so excited about this because it's something I've been thinking about doing for a while, but I don't know where to start. And I also have this fear of, what the hell am I going to talk about for an hour a week or an hour a month? And the odd thing is I have no issues talking. I mean, you and I can talk the hind leg off the chair. But when it comes to actually talking about my business, I suddenly sit there with a mouthful of teeth. So Rose, can you help me? Can you tell me, if I was going to start a podcast, where would I start?
Well, firstly, a podcast doesn't have to be for an hour. You can do a podcast 15-minute episodes. They don't have to be overly long. And the first thing you have to do is, make the decision to start, and then register an email address. I keep my email address for my podcast separate from my business address, just so that things don't get lost. Then register a domain name, because it's easier to upload your podcast to a website. And then register with a podcast host. I started out with SoundCloud. I've just since changed to Fusebox. I find it's a little bit cheaper, and they'll host and and upload my episodes for a little bit cheaper than I can get with SoundCloud. So, but that's just for me. You can go to other ones. You can go to, there's heaps of them out there, and most people that you host with will integrate you with Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podtrack, all sorts of other places, so that you don't actually have to open up a channel with those. They're automatically integrated with those. So, and most of my podcasts are heard on Apple.
That's interesting, because I always thought, I've got to open an account with Apple and SoundCloud and all the others, and then how do I get on there? So what you're saying is like hosting a website. You basically host your podcasts on a platform, and the platform takes care of it.
Absolutely. You see, I was like you. I thought that if I had to open a podcast on all the other channels, but you don't need to. It's not necessary. You can actually have them integrated from your host, and it's amazing.
Right. Okay. Well, that sounds really easy. So if I was going to set up a little studio, what would I need from a technology perspective to get started?
Your phone. That's all you need. Your phone. You don't need anything else big and fancy. I started off with a laptop, so I just used the laptop microphone and camera. Yeah, you can do a podcast from your phone as long as you put it in landscape. It's good. Or if you're going to put your episodes on Instagram, on Instagram TV, then put it in portrait. But most otherwise, put it in your phone in landscape. But you can just start with your phone. You don't need anything fancy. You don't need any fancy equipment whatsoever. It's so simple.
Wow.
But if you've got a laptop or a desktop, you can just start with the camera and microphone that are inbuilt into those. I wouldn't keep going with that, because the sound quality is not so good. People will forgive you for bad video quality, but they will definitely not forgive you for bad sound quality, because it's the podcast, and people, don't want to be listening to breaks and static in the background. I suggest that you get an app called Crisp, KRISP, that takes out any background noise. So if you're in an area that has high traffic or a lot of dogs barking in the background, then Crisp automatically integrate that with your Zoom, integrates with your microphone and your video already. So it's really, really simple. I love it. Our green screen is really good. I don't have mine on today, so you can see that my head's sort of a bit, a bit fuzzy around them. But a green screen, you can buy round ones from eBay or one of those. I think I paid $30 for mine in Australian dollars, and it just hooks up to the back of your chair, so you don't lose your fingers. I use Zoom to do all of my podcasts. So make sure that you've got your logo and that visible, so people know what you're doing. If you're going to do a podcast, I would have some branding on it. And then you've got your studio art that you do. I just used Canva to make my own.
Yeah,
I did get someone to make my logo for me. So, yeah, you've got to be a certain size. Otherwise, it won't be accepted on a lot of the platforms. It's either got to be 1400 by 1400 pixels or 3000 by 3000 pixels.
Okay.
It can't be any of those other sizes.
Well, those sorts of talents, if you're not good at them, are fairly easy to pick up on Fiverr or Upwork, and on relatively inexpensive. The other thing is an intro and an outro for your podcast, which you can also get done on Fiverr or Upwork, which is that little bit of
music. I had a friend of mine do mine, but you can do your own. It's not a big hassle. You just your intro is just what your podcast is about. If you're going to have a YouTube channel with your podcast as well, then just some visuals and an outro just to thank people for coming and where they can subscribe.
Yeah,
easy.
The biggest amount of work sounds like doing the actual thing, putting it together, producing it, because to start with, you really don't need very much. I don't know how many people don't actually have a mobile phone. So if you can just start with this thing, that's incredibly powerful. And then even a microphone isn't that expensive. So what you're saying is it's fairly cheap to get started and fairly easy.
They're about $200 for a good one. Yeah, Rode Mini or a Blue Yeti, they're the best ones. I find you can get ones with the mouth guard on them if you need them, but you don't really need that. If you've got Crisp, the sound quality is quite good.
Well, that's
And I'd get an external camera too. So I've got a Logitech screen mounted one that I use. Yeah, and they're about, I don't know, I think they're about $150.
Yeah, I bought myself one the other day, and I bought a Verbatim, which is not Logitech. Logitech is meant to be one of the best, but it's still an HD camera, 30 frames per second. Of course, if you look on eBay, it's even cheaper. So really, if you want to set up on a budget, I bought this one at Officeworks for about 80, and then I found the same one on eBay. So I did a bit of a naughty. I bought the eBay one and took back the Officeworks one. So yes, where there's a will, there's a way. You can definitely get started on a shoestring budget.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit, though, about how you would produce something like this.
If you're not tech savvy, then I would outsource that part of your podcast. I use a couple of programs. For editing my video, I use Wondershare Filmora. And for my audio, I actually scrape the audio from the video to make my audio to upload to the podcast channels. But you can use things like Audacity to edit audio, but I use VLC to strip the audio out of it. I use Otter to transcribe. Otter does integrate with Zoom, and so that whilst you're recording your podcast, it automatically transcribes for you as long as you match it up properly. It's just automatic, so you don't need to actually upload the audio to Otter to get it transcribed. It does it live for you, so it's really, really good.
That's a real time saver. It's not a huge amount of time, but it's still a pain to then have to go and do it afterwards and remember it.
Yeah, it takes about 10 minutes or so, depending on how long your podcast episode is.
Yeah.
So it's just extra time, and it takes me an hour and a half to 2 hours to edit each podcast episode.
You also produce podcasts for people, don't you?
I do. Plus, I have my other side of my business. I make videos for people to promote their businesses on someone's website at the moment. So I do a lot of other things other than podcasting.
If I was to start a podcast, I would have to clearly decide on the branding, plan out my sessions. So work out, let's say, a month ahead of what I'm going to do over that period, show up, do the podcast, create the podcast. And then if I didn't actually want to do the production, I could hand it to someone like you and say, Rose, here's the raw stuff, go for your life. And then what would you do from there? Would you actually even take it all the way through to uploading it onto a hosting platform?
Yes. Yeah, I would have all the details for their host site, and I would upload it for them to YouTube if they had a channel, and to their podcast hosting channel. So I would upload it all to that, access to all of their branding and their cover art and so forth, so that it was all consistent. When you're uploading to the podcast channels, you've got to use the same cover art all the time, like the background of it. I just changed the guests, so the photo with the guest obviously is changed every time there's a new guest, but everything else is consistent. It makes the channel look nice. It's a bit like when you're uploading to Instagram and you're trying to keep your branding the same across the whole platform.
Your branding is very important as well. You need that consistency. It needs to look professional. You don't need to spend millions on it, but you do want colors, themes, personality coming through as well.
So absolutely, yeah, it's got to be all the same.
Yeah. Would you say they're replacing blogs, or they're the next generation?
Well, yeah, I guess you can't really replace a blog, but a podcast, I think, is more. People can listen to it while they're doing whatever. They do the washing up at the kitchen sink, or they in the shower. You can listen to a podcast anywhere. To read a blog, you actually have to be in a dry place, unless you've got waterproof paper. True. So a podcast you can listen on the way to work. You put on your radio, you do whatever you like, and it's easy. A vlog, which is a video podcast, people still have to sit and watch it. We listen to a podcast anyway.
You can multitask while you're listening to the podcast. Yes, I hear what
Absolutely.
You're saying. I hear what you're saying. I actually very often listen to them when I go walking with my dog. They're difficult to read and walk at the same time. So I hear exactly what you're saying. Rose, thank you so much for your time today.
You're very welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for having me.
It's been so insightful. I think you've convinced me to look into starting a podcast. As you know, my goal is to help 1 million women achieve financial freedom. Just yesterday, I was actually talking to hiring a new copywriter, but guy I'm potentially hiring is in Nigeria. And he was also talking to me about the issues that African women face. I've got a client in Ghana who has the same mission to try and help women in those countries. I just feel that we women now are in such a powerful position to get out there and to share our message with the world and to make a difference that way. So I'm really excited that what you're doing is helping women do this. And yeah, I think I'm going to potentially look at starting my own podcast. And of course,
you know where to come if you need a producer.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I hate the details. So I'll just do it and then say, Rose, it's all yours, because you are a master at detail.
So if anyone wants to reach out to me, they can reach me at rose-davidson.com. It's my website, and you'll find all the details on there and how you can get your own podcast up and going or become a guest.
Yes, or subscribe.
With the experts.
Or subscribe.
Thanks, Anne. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Angela Cedrin, your host. This has been another really insightful interview with today's guest, Rose Davidson, who is an absolute master at podcasting. Please subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you in the next episode.